Swampberg. 12 o'clock, 12 it ways to open the sunlight train at 12 o'clock 11. And we check quickly what is the time now, like 12 o'clock. I don't know which sector is how to take it, but go through today's. At least one more place and we a entry point.
So shall we start? Yes, let's get started. Welcome everybody to our last session in this course on economics of education. As we had last week already a couple of presentations, today we will have 3 more final presentations. Victor and I look very much forward to hear about your presentations. And before this last time we went online, we thought it's quite fair if everyone has the same chance. We go online today as well. And the same rules apply as last time, as we have short presentations and then a discussion. And I will stop talking now and directly hand over to our first presenter. That's Hugo Gonzalez. And you can check whether you can have the rights to share your screen.
Okay, so I should share my screen again.
Yeah, so it's 8 to 12 minutes presentations and then 8 to 10 minutes discussion.
Okay. Can you see the?
Yes, that works. Can you go full screen? Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so then I'm going to start the timer and the floor is yours. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Okay. So hello, I'm Hugo. I'm going to present my great proposal on the effects of international mobility on mid-term individual earnings. I was especially interested in this topic because right now I'm exposed here in Berlin. But also last year I did some circle. So I wanted to check if these all the changes, what will be the return when I need you. So first of all, an introduction. Some years ago, these exchange programs were an activity that not everybody did, but with the time it's become more popular with programs like Erasmus Plus. They are supposed to cause positive externalities, both for the economy. In 2024, 1.5 million people did an Erasmus exchange, being Spain the biggest sender and receiver of the students, followed by Germany and France. In this topic, we would be to compete with the human theory and the human capital theory, and I'm going to talk about it later. So my research question is, what is the causal impact of participating in an academic exchange abroad during bachelor or master's degree and the gross monthly 5 years after graduation? For this, we will also study how does this effect vary across fields of study, destination country, and duration. So contribution to the field, and first a temporal depth. So taking into account the 5 years later after graduation, we clear out the noise of the entry-level internships or the temporary unemployment periods that usually happen after graduation. Also addressing the unity through control variables. This way we isolate the effect of mobility from the student background, and also the policy relevance for the EHEA, the European High Student Area. We find that the training is strongly correlated with high socioeconomic backgrounds. The academic exchange would be reinforcing existing social inequalities. A bit of literature review. So human capital versus human theory. So yeah, we know human capital states that when you go in international growth, you get all these sorts of transnational abilities, transnational human capital with you, and then you can use it, use this skill in some company. Well, similarly theory defends that the exchange works as a signal for employers that they see that you have certain kinds of abilities, like some skills, or maybe you are more ambitious, or maybe you have a more risk aversion, more adaptability. Then the empirical evidence and mobility premium in the medium term. So Kratz and Nets in 2016, they already studied that many international students at first it takes them more time to get position because they try to find a job where their international experience is valued. So that's why the 5 years after graduation is a very good choice, because it's very clear this first experience, right? Then the wage projection. So it was already done that international students with international background, they are overrepresented in international firms, where let's say that the ladder for escalating the company is much more clear, and the wage projection is more clear, and yeah, the path to getting higher wages is more established. Also, the problem of short-term studies, as I said before, the noise of initial matching is going to lower paying jobs. Also, they are delayed returns because maybe mobility premium skills are not used at first, but later on jobs with other responsibilities, like maybe your direction. That's why 5 years later is also induction. And then the subjectivity bias. Because earlier studies in this topic relied on the self-perception of each student. So they rated what they think they gained abroad, which might cause a justification bias, while they say certain answers to justify that their experience was good. A bit more into literature reviews, the unity, selection bias. So the socioeconomic background, as I said, so we isolate the effect of exchange. We shouldn't take into account socioeconomic background of the students. And also the pre-existing abilities, because maybe students with certain abilities are more prone to do this exchange. And then a student who wouldn't have done the exchange, but also has disabilities, would also have a higher wage. aspects across fields and pressure. The field to study methods in some cities which are more institutionalized, like we can think of education, maybe, or health. This mobility premium is lower, whereas in other areas like business or law or economics, it is more valued. And then the duration and the ECTS. Yeah, we are looking for Rodriguez fund for the mobility premium to be significant. It had to be it had to last at least one term, and it had to be validated with European credits. This way, we minimize the opportunity cost. We will be using the database of Aerograduate. This is from the European Union European Commission, and it's a questionnaire. It includes a lot of information about the student background, the academic background, of course, but also in the labor market, of the cities where they come from, what they study now. So it's very useful for our purpose. With our sample selection, of course, we're going to graduates who are working and with more than one job. We will consider the most important. The treating the people. It's those who carry at least 4 months long experience, the experience abroad, and that were recognized for ECTS. Then for the outliers management, we reduce the effect of the gross monthly earnings of the top 1%, and then the domestic group will be standardized with fewer equivalents in 2020. So variable selection. As a dependent variable, we have the monthly earnings, but also the hourly wage derived from the monthly earnings. So that it's not that someone works a lot, but that hour is paid very highly. As independent variables, we want the international mobility, the country of destination, and the length of exchange for the month. For functional variables, we will use a pre-university background, the academic quality, the socio-economic background, the experience and education history, and language knowledge. So, methodology. As I said, indigeneity is the biggest challenge in society because at the end of the day, how can we make sure that there is no prediction of the income received 5 years later, other than the fact of carrying out an exchange abroad? We have here simple regression. It's a logarithm of wage based on the mobility premium, and of course with the constant in return and all the control variables I mean. So our method to address this problem will be for the use of instrumental variables. First, first stage, relevance, we use institutional mobility propensity as an instrument, the Erasmus culture. So the idea behind that is that if a given university, the students are very prone to do, and it's very easy for them to do these things, then their academic, their background shouldn't matter that much because there's like an environment of people going abroad to the very common, right? And then the second stage, the situation restriction, we use the logarithm of weight of the predicted mobility according to the Erasmus culture, obviously plus the control variables, the constants, and the return. And then, as the last check, we use the connection peers, and yeah, we model with non-mobile peers based on kind of communication, academic quality, and field of study. And this way, we ensure that we are comparing similar kind of graduates and expected results. So I have the intuition that the international mobility will have a positive and statistically significant effect on gross earnings 5 years after graduation. Also, that this variation also that it will vary across the different countries. It's expected not to be the same in case maybe in Germany, Slovenia. Also, we will check whether the mobility area higher or lower for specific demographic groups. And also, it is very important to consider the difference in purchasing power parity when comparing across countries, because we know it's not the same getting 10,000 euros a month in Germany or in Switzerland. So that will be all. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Perfect time. Question. I think I did not fully understand your instrumental variable. Maybe you can go to the slide. And here I was wondering, what is I? That's the student. What is that? Sorry. Or the I. So the mobility I is the I of the student. So what is Erasmus culture? You mentioned that, but I did not understand at which which level this variable varies.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I was trying that you not have that much time to explain. Yeah, so the Erasmus culture, we get it from the Bible, A1. It's about the university they are going to. This way we can check how many, the proportion of the students who work in Erasmus in a given university. So this way we can see that all the people going to that university are in that given people usually go to on exchange. Yeah, so this way we can.
Sorry, but is it about the university where the sending university or the hosting university?
Sending university.
The sending university. Okay. So that varies at the level of the sending university. This instrument.
Yeah, that's like the expected mobility of a given student. It's given by the Erasmus culture of that university he has institute.
Okay, but does it have the same value for everyone in the university?
No, of course not. no, because as we are adding also the control variables, this expected mobility takes into account the Erasmus culture, but also
sure. No, but I mean the instrument Erasmus culture.
Yeah.
So if two students are from the same university, do they have the same value for the Erasmus culture university? That's what I'm trying to understand.
No, I guess it wouldn't, because Erasmus culture is not only based on the university itself, but also across different degrees in the in the uni.
So there's variation within and between and across universities.
Yeah.
Okay. This might also make, if you had to implement that, at some point it might make sense to control for the university or the subject where someone is. So if there was no variation across universities, across the university, then you would basically capture differences between universities. But you could kind of control for that. That was kind of more like an advanced comment. On page or slide 9, you described both independent variables and control variables. What's the difference?
Because as I said, my interest in this study is not only to measure the premium mobility premium, but also how does this mobility premium varies depending on the length of change. Is the same. How much does one additional month add to the mobility premium? The country of destination is the same United States in Germany than in Spain or France. And also international mobility, which we assume it's available, is always less.
Okay, so because often people use the term independent variables to refer to all variables on the right-hand side of your equation. But here, what you mean is kind of international mobility is your treatment variable, and the others are kind of then more measures of heterogeneity. So whether the effect differs by the country of destination, and whether the effect differs by the length of exchange. So it's more about labeling.
But for me it's more, my intention was, I assume that the length of exchange on the country of destination so it's also interesting to measure, to include in our study. How does this difference in the country and the situation affect the dependent variable? This is your application. I'm not sure that answers the question.
Yeah, I think my point was more of labeling. Yeah, because that independent variables is not the best label that you can give to this kind of variables. Yeah, I agree. It makes completely sense to analyze them. And you want to examine effect heterogeneity. Yeah, that's kind of also what you mentioned at the end. Yeah, whether the effect differs between different students. And I was wondering, have you thought how to implement that or combine it with an instrumental variable strategy?
What do you mean? Sorry?
So you do IV, right? You have an instrumental variable strategy. And how would you incorporate effect heterogeneity here? Yeah, so whether the effect differs by parental background, for instance.
So how do you make sure that there is not? How do I know that there's not indigeneity even with instrumental variable? Do you mean?
No more how. I mean, you're interested in studying the average effect. Yeah, with an instrument, you get a local average treatment effect. Now the question is, how would you do the same when you're interested in whether the effect differs for boys and for girls, or for individuals from low SES parents or high social status parents?
Yeah. So all these control variables are also included in the regression, which is this X. So if we want to see these differences, we could check, go to the specific variable that we want to check, like gender, and this way we could see this variation across gender or the academic or family background.
Yeah, then we would see basically whether the outcomes differ by gender, but not so much whether the effect differs by gender. Yeah, so whether the alpha 1 differs by gender. So for that.
Okay, yeah, but this variable was also included in this first stage.
Right. Okay. Victor, do you have further questions?
Yes, actually, I have a couple of questions. So first of all, so I can believe from this slide that Erasmus culture can predict quite well the individual probability to pursue international mobility. But might it be the case that the instrument is not really exogenous, because might it be the case that universities with better Erasmus culture tend to provide their graduates with better salaries after graduation? So might there be some effect of the instruments to the Y variable besides these X?
Might be, but actually in these control variables, all these effects like the economic background and family background, the pre-university, the language knowledge are also included. So it's expected not to influence. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, because it's quite easy to understand that your instrument is relevant, but then the exogeneity is really hard to prove, given that there might be some ethics here. Okay, and could you move to the next slide? I think so. It was not clear. You also seems like you were using some kind of matching, but we didn't cover this method in the course. So could you please elaborate a bit, like what kind of matching you use, which problem does it resolve, or which problem does it resolve? So what's for you?
Yeah. So as we said, there might be a continuous problem with our variable, or we use the variables. So that's why I thought that the matching first is a good strategy, because this way we are comparing two identical students, but everything, but the reacts with such things abroad. This way, 5 years later, we can go to the student portable, the student will stay in the same unit, and we can see, we can also measure this way, which is this difference in the wage, which would be also like a way of checking the validity.
Okay, so does it resolve also problems? Why do we need to use the variables then if we can do everything with match? Is there any problem remaining after the matching procedure?
Let me think of it.
Can we match on unobserved abilities or motivations or something like that?
No, we cannot. Right?
Yes, exactly, and that's why, right? So that's why you need to do this selection of unobservables also to the variable, right? Because matching can help you with selection of observables. Okay, yeah, from my side, no more questions. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you. Yep. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Then Paul.
Yeah. Very famous screen. Does it work?
Yes.
Great. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to present you my replication study, my computation and robustness reproduction of the paper Social Interactions in High School Lessons from an Earthquake, which was published in 2007 by Gefei-FIONA and Rosolia. And this paper studies the peers' for educational outcomes, and they focus on high school graduation. And their central research question was whether peers positively affect the educational outcomes. And this is difficult to answer here because of the reflection problem, which was discussed by Nancy in 1993. And he says that outcomes for the peer groups tend to move together, and therefore positive adaptation is pretty difficult. And for example, if female graduation is correlated with male graduation, you cannot really tell whether the males and first females both respond to common factors. And this is a problem in peer effect estimation. And this then creates an individuality problem between the peer outcomes and the individual outcomes. And therefore, the original paper addressed this using natural experiments where they use an IV regression to generate heterogeneous variation of male outcomes. Their setting was that they had a look at the 1980s earthquake in southern Italy, and there the government sorted the towns into damaged zones, and they used 57 towns that were treated and 60 control towns right at the boundary of the earthquake zone. And as a policy response here, the males in the affected towns were exempted from the compulsory military service. But this only applied to males born between -63 and -65, and the females were never directly treated by this policy. And so they used the exemption eligibility as an instrument. They had the male high school graduation as an indigenous variable, and the female high school graduation was the outcome of interest. And their exclusion restriction requires that the exemption checks the female outcomes only through the male peers. In the main results from the original study, we could see that in the first stage results, the exemption increases the male graduation by about 2.15 percentage points. But here they didn't really show it in their paper, but in my calculations later, I could see that the first stage F statistic was around 4, and so the instrument was weak, and because F statistic of 4 falls below the common rule of thumb threshold of 10. And in the reduced form results, they could see that the exemption increases the female graduation by about 1.8 percentage points, And to conclude this, the final IV estimate implies that a 1 percentage point increase in male graduation raises the female graduation by approximately 0.85 percentage points, which corresponds to a social multiplier effect of approximately 1.85. Because of the weak instrument, the authors relied on an Anderson-Rubin inference, but I'm going to come back to that later. And my population approach was as follows. First, I assessed the computational reproducibility, by reproducing all the published figures and tables. And second, then I conducted the robustness analysis that was not included in the original paper. Here on the slide, you can see what I did, but I'm going to talk about that later. My goal here was to evaluate whether the original findings are robust to modern econometric standards and inference methods. First, for the computational reproducibility results, the replication package that was provided, it provides analysis-ready data and estimation code, but they didn't really provide raw data or a data cleaning code, which then limits the full end-to-end reproducibility, but it really didn't really affect the reproduction of the analysis from the analysis data. I could replicate all the main tables. There were maybe from one table there was one line missing, and also the code for figure 3 was missing, but I could reproduce it anyway because the data was available, and I could just make the code for the reproduction of the code for the figure 3. The point estimates matched the published results nearly exactly, but the main minor discrepancy was that the Anderson-Rubin p-values were higher in most of the results, and those differences are likely due to numerical precision or implementation details. But importantly, they didn't really affect the relative conclusions, but it's pretty important to have a look at the inference following slides in my master's analysis, because of the deviation from the Rubin p-value. The key finding here I had was the big instrument problem, because in the first stage F statistic, the F was 6.04, and when I used the class robust, the first stage of statistics was lower, it was 4.07. And if we then have a look at the critical values from Stock and Yoga from 2005, indicating a weak instrument, is towards the IB inference, it falls below all thresholds, especially with the class robust first stage of statistics. And this weakness possibly arises because there were only 3 cohorts in the 57 treated towns that were affected by the exception. And as a result, the instrument generates some limited variation in male graduation rates. Therefore, as I already said, the authors used the Anderson-Rubin inference, which remains valid even when the instruments are weak. However, this Anderson-Rubin inference comes at the cost of low statistical power. Then when we have a look at my first robustness check, the cluster standard errors, the treatment here was assigned at the town level, so the outcomes may be correlated within towns. And to account for this, I re-estimated the domain specification with all controls using the widely used IVREC2 command, together with the town level cluster standard errors. And here the ID coefficient remained unchanged at 0.5, but the Anderson-Rubin p-value increased from 0.03 to 0.045, and the results remain, so the results remain statistically significant at the 5% level, but only marginal, because it was only the p-value was only 0.447. So to give a further interpretation from that, with the weak instruments, the inference is highly sensitive to methodological choices. Then my second robustness check was a V1 town out analysis, where I re-estimate the preferred specification 117 times, excluding one town at a time. And here the ID coefficient ranged roughly from 0.74 to 1.05, and the maximum deviation from the baseline estimate was about 4.45 standard deviations, which indicates that there was not really a single town that has a disproportionate influence of the point estimate. However, 30% of the iterations lose statistical significance at the 5% level, which reflects the limited power due to small number of clusters and instruments. So the key findings here were that across the specifications, the peer effect coefficient ranges from 0.68 to 0.85 and from 0.74 to 1.05 for time-out analysis. And this shows a relative stability of the point estimates, and this suggests that there's a genuine peer effect present. But however, of statistical significance it varies due to the weak instruments and the small sample of 117 towns. So the core tension here lies between the credibility and statistical power. This trade-off between the credibility and the statistical power is inherent to the research design of the methodological mistake. So as a result, the study can detect that there's a peer effect existing, but they cannot really provide precise estimates of the magnitude. And now to conclude and give some implications, should we believe the peer effect? Yeah, I think so that we can, and because the coefficient is stable across all the robustness checks. But should we trust the precise magnitude? I don't really think so because of the weak instruments, and also because the local treatment effect interpretation here in the IV implication limits the generalizability. So now, from a policy perspective, the results apply the peer effect matters for educated interventions, and that social modifiers exist, but policymakers should avoid using specific point estimates or this specific point estimate for detailed cost-benefit calculations. Methodologically, the study illustrates the inherent predictability power trade-off in natural experiments, and they also can show that in settings with weak instruments, the weak instrument robust inference is essential. And for future research, they could strengthen the inference through larger samples, multiple identification strategies, or a better understanding of the underlying mechanisms. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Out of curiosity, why did you choose this paper?
To be fair, it was pretty hard to find a reproducible paper with all the data available. So the code wasn't always available, but mainly data was available. And in addition to that, I found it pretty interesting that they had a look at an earthquake, because I didn't really think first that you could just have a look at an earthquake and such a natural experiment and conduct the peer effect from that earthquake in Italy, just in a random place in Italy. And I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, this is where the name natural experiment comes from. Yeah. I mean, here's really natural experiment with the individuals. And I was wondering, what did the authors put forward as an argument? Why do they find such an effect? And why do they find like a positive effect here? What does that mean?
Yeah, so why is it a positive peer effect or
positive here and this magnitude?
Yeah, they find it because the male graduates, they were exempted. Normally they have to do the compulsory military service, and if they go out of school, many of them don't really return after it. And because of that, of course, this has an influence on the female graduates, because the towns in Italy are pretty small, and with that, back in 1980, they didn't really have internet, and they didn't really have the mobility to go to other places, and so the magnitude is pretty large here because they are always connecting inside of a small Italian town, and can't really have the mobility as nowadays, and are really influencing all their friends and peers around them in their town.
So the idea is the males do not have to go to military service, so they can stay longer in school, And consequently, also the females stay longer in school or graduate. Yes.
True. Because the females also graduate because they push each other up, and they have a peer effect on each other.
Okay. Can you think of problems for the instrument? I mean, you mentioned like this weak instrument problem, but can you also think about problems for the validity of the instrument in the present case?
So so they tested that pretty much because of course the exemption and from the military service and all that could have an influence on all the other economic outcomes in this area, or especially the earthquake. So this could be, so I don't know if I got the question right.
No, I think it goes in the same direction. In the right direction.
So the exemption and also like the earthquake itself could have a big influence on the economic outcomes in this area and all the graduation outcomes. But they pretty much tested this and made some robustness checks to factor that out, to have a look at that.
I think we just have to be careful because we can't test for the exclusion. We can provide additional evidence that what the author do, that maybe some of the channels, alternative channels for the instrument directly or indirectly affects the outcome, that they don't play the major role. That's what they can do. But we can't test for that. Victor, do you have questions?
No, actually, no. I just want to highlight that I also saw the same in the paper. It's always very good and very robust.
Okay. Nice. I was wondering why do the p-values for this Anderson Hoover procedure get different? And everything else is identical, but not Anderson Hoover p-values.
I couldn't really check this. So I had a closer look at it, and of course, I also did a bit research on that. The thing is, they use the conduit thread data, and even when I did that, even then the p-values differed. So as I said, like in my main replication of the paper, and I couldn't really get it. So there was a deviation of one observation in my calculations, which probably indicates that there's a difference in putting up the variables and stuff like that, because they didn't really publish the data cleaning code. So that could be something that I couldn't really figure out how they cleaned the raw data. Maybe there's a small problem, or maybe in the strictness how that they did in the calculations. Some with the newer state ever, because the paper is like 20 years old.
Yeah, so it might also be on the software side. And kind of with Stata, I think a very nice feature is that there's this version command.
So that
I don't know whether they do that, but I mean, like when you have like a version of Stata, let's say Stata version 18, where you can just type in version 9, and then it sets all the commands back to as you had access to version 9 on. But this only works for the built-in commands. And for user-written commands, so the A2 files, this kind of might, there might be older versions where some algorithms are different. That's nowadays. The paper was published in one of the most respected journals in economics, in the American Economic Review. And this journal actually nowadays has a data edit. So that means, at that time when the paper was published, it was mandatory to share the code and also the data if you were allowed to. But then people realized this is not sufficient. And we can't reproduce the results. Yeah? I mean, this is kind of partly what you mentioned or experience as well, right? I mean, it was good that you could reproduce much of the paper, but still there were some deviations, and then you mentioned some code that was not available for some of the figures or tables, and also you mentioned that it was only the analytical data set provided, not the raw data set. Yeah, and all of this meant, okay, it was not so reproducible as one would wish for, and therefore they installed this data editor, and the data editor and his team, they basically check every condition except paper and do basically the same what you do, yeah? And basically check whether they can reproduce the results based on the material. Yeah, so exactly reproduce, and then they also kind of check this, and then kind of demonstrate they, with time became really good, and spotting like where why differences arise. Yeah, because I mean this computational reproducibility, that's actually a minimum standard. Yeah. So you have the same data, you have the same code, but still it's interesting to see you get slightly different results in some cases. Yeah, so that means there's something where we kind of need to improve the procedures.
Yeah. And I don't know, question, why is it like so hard to find a replication image that is fully available? Because for me, I thought that you could just, I was at the ICTC website online and the American Economic Review website, and they always provided that the data was really never available, because of course it's like public data that is sensitive, but sometimes it was even hard to get the data. So it seems like that it's pretty hard to get even the data.
You mean the data or the code?
The data. The code was always hard to get the code. Like, why is it like that? Like, why?
I mean, sometimes the authors are not allowed to share the data because they don't own the data. So these are kind of collected by the government, so you have to independently download it. So much of my research, I don't collect data myself, but someone else collected the data, like some huge survey agency or government agency, so I cannot just share the data. So that's kind of the reason why not a lot of data is shared due to legal restrictions. Or sometimes when it was not mandatory to do that, people who collected data themselves, they were kind of scared to share their data, because then others could just write their own paper, and the original authors put in the effort. But therefore, kind of this is now mandatory. And the different aspect is that I think the journals can improve by earlier signaling whether code and data is available, and so that they have like a clear list. So where you see for each paper, it's clean code available, analysis code, clear the data, and so on. Yeah, but this whole process is kind of evolving at the moment. Yeah, but I mean, I checked this many times. There are many papers out there that have both data.
Okay. Yeah, because American Economic Review was the only journal that I could find that really provides a list of usable papers. And all the other journals was pretty hard to find their coded data.
Yeah, they're improving. Kind of where they have now a standard section where this information is kind of provided. And I mean, there are also the American Economic Journals, so several journals of the American Economic Association. They have the same rules as the American Economic as the American Economic. And that was part like of a mass reproducibility studies where 120 teams reproduced 120 papers, mostly from the American Economic Review, but also from other journals. So it's not that every paper has data and code available, but there are many papers that have both. It's just not it's not like just one list, where you can find this up. So that might be room for improvement for the American Economic Association. So now I will suggest this to the data editor at some point. All right. I don't have further questions, Victor. Okay, then let's clap our virtual hands. So that was the wrong button once more, everyone. And then we hand over to our last presentation of today to Gefei-FIONA.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I could not hear you. I could not hear you very well.
Oh.
It was very, very remote. If you can try say something again, maybe the others can hear it.
Okay. Now can you hear me?
Okay. Camera is on.
Okay, so
You're not muted, but I can't hear you.
I don't know why I got a little bit problem with the microphone. I don't know why the voice is not so loud. Like a little bit problem with my iPad, so that's why I look for the function. But I will try my best to take a look into it. Can you hear me?
Screen sharing works, which is nice. That's only the microphone.
And now, can you hear me?
Okay, maybe you can try some other device for the sound, like your telephone, for example. You can also access the conference with your telephone and then use it for the sound.
Okay,
it might be a solution.
Now is that better? Now is that better? For the voices?
With the telephone, you can just click on the link, right?
Yeah, okay, so we're going to
be able to join. Do we also have like a normal telephone number that's possible to call?
Yeah, so I download the like,
I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, there is.
so now hear me? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.